All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this town hall meeting about the impacts of AI on the creative arts and intellectual property. As we all know, AI has rapidly improved in just the last few years, and as students, we've seen the use of AI increasing in all areas of school. Many of us use AI to help in completing homework and to save time. We see our teachers using AI to create more diverse lessons and assignments. Outside of school, we know AI has been tremendous potential in scientific research and solving complex problems. One area that has sparked debate is the role of AI in creative arts like painting, photography, music, theater, and drama. By training models with human-made art as the dataset, AI has become very convincing at making art in the style of the human-made art on which it was trained. Often, artists don't grant permission to use their work, and they don't receive recognition or royalties. Is it ethical for companies or end users to use this AI-generated art? Moreover, will AI gradually displace real artists from the workforce? Will there be future jobs for artists, musicians, and other creative professionals? If there aren't as many human artists to create things, will this lead to AI just recycling the same ideas and stifle human creativity? Now, this is a very broad topic, but it has never been more important than right now with the recent news of China's AI product and some recent rulings by the U.S. federal courts. To explore this, we've invited veteran artist Ed Beer Jr. to join us for this discussion. Many of you are familiar with Ed and his work, but for those of you who are not, Ed has been a professional artist for over 40 years. He has taught airbrush since 1982. He has served as art director for several games manufacturers. He's been a licensed illustrator for games, books, calendars, movies, TVs, and other media sources. Ed prefers to use traditional, tangible mediums without the aid of technology. Everything Ed does is hand-drawn and hand-painted, strictly using hand-eye coordination. Ed has always been an advocate for protecting copyright of artists and intellectual properties. He has fought in federal court to protect his copyright and the rights of other creatives who have had their images used without permission. Ed brings a lifetime of experience, and we are happy to have him share his thoughts with us. With that, welcome, Ed.
Well, hello. Are you Leo?
Yes, I am Leo.
Applause to you, Leo, and your friends for even considering doing this. It was amazing getting your email, and the fact that you have the insight and the foresight to talk about this topic, which is so important. I want to thank you very much for hosting me.
Well, thank you for coming. You ready for questioning?
Let's go.
Okay. So our first question is, how has AI affected your career in the industry that you've worked in and other careers of your fellow artists in your field?
Okay. Before I start anything, I want to tell everybody in the audience here, my goal is to not give you doom and gloom. What I'm going to give you is empowerment. In fact, I'm going to tell you exactly how much power you really have in the decision-making process of using AI or not using AI in everything. But as specific to your question, so yes, I've been an illustrator for 35 years in the game industry. I'm associated with many, many of the top illustrators in the country. And they use various different tools, from digital palettes to hand-painted. What I can tell you and what I've seen, especially being on the different social media groups, Discords, Facebooks, that have a lot of artists on it that are talking about this AI subject, so many of them have lost their jobs outright. I mean, basically, it's a matter of money, guys. Corporations, manufacturers that hire artists or license art to be used on their products are looking for the bottom line. They're looking for how can they get away with costs, minimize costs, which increases the shareholder profit margins. So that is what's going to be the motivating dictation. I mean, this is what just people and companies decide to do. So naturally, when you have a company like Midjourney, which was one of the big AI generating image platforms that was very successful, you're going to have huge profits being moved to what would have been going out to self-employed artists to now into the company's hands. $250 billion worth, actually, within a year for Midjourney and several other companies. You know, you have Stability AI, Stable Diffusion. It just goes on the list. So there was, in fact, major displacement in jobs. I mean, when you have a data set that is accumulation of billions of images that were ever produced on the internet, that are, of course, IP, intellectual property of artists, everything from authorship, music, art, and that's used to train this AI without licensing, without permission, you have the ability to generate images that are very similar and very proficient and effective for any company that wants to use them. So it's going to be a natural instinct if there are no laws, regulations, and anything that is going to govern the use of the AI's generated images, you're going to have this kind of automatic mass exodus away from hand painted. So yes, it has affected my fellow illustrators and artists dramatically. I hear about it every day when I'm at the different shows and conventions I go to, young artists that come up to me and say, you know, how do I even compete in this market? but I can tell you some positive things about it. But first, let's go to the next question. You might actually be touching about that.
Okay, so our next questions can be asked by Alyssa Emmett, so I'll ask you to come up here.
Okay.
Do you think that AI companies are taking advantage of actual artists?
Yeah, anytime you utilize imaging or intellectual property of anyone without licensing, without authorization, or without permission, it's a violation of copyright. I mean, that's your basic fundamental principles behind copyright law. So, yes, the answer to that is absolutely.
So, is there any sort of action you can take against this, or?
Yes, tremendous power. So, you're not going to be able to control necessarily what happens on layers of government. Let's say, if you have your top elite, you have oligarch companies, you have organized monopolies and things of that nature. You have some degree of limitations. You do have power of voting, of course. You have the ability to vote in the legislative representatives and senators that you feel will reflect your opinions on these issues, but you have to make those extremely loud and clear. The biggest power that every one of you have, and it's going to be literally the responsibility of your generation, is the power of boycott. You have the ability to say, I don't like the way you're using this AI, and I don't like this either, whether it be the intellectual property theft, the ethical issues behind it, how much resources it may be using, water resources and all that stuff. And you can do that by simply saying any company that is not respectful of that, is not honoring the appropriate intellectual property laws and so forth, we're not going to buy from you. And believe me when I tell you, you have that power. If you don't purchase or support these companies that are not using AI in an appropriate way, you can shut them down overnight. So that is your answer to power. You have all of the power. It's no different than me in business. If I just decide to paint pictures that I like, subjects that I'm interested in, well, then I'm painting for myself. I'm not going to sell anything. The only way I make money is if I appeal to the vast majority of people who come into my shops, whether it's at the Ren Fairs or the Comic Con. My entire portfolio must consist of images that capture the imagination of the public. And if it doesn't, I don't make any money. So I am beholden to all of you and everyone out there, just like any manufacturer using AI.
All right. This kind of leads us nice into our next question. Alex Barr, can you come up here?
What can young people desiring to enter the creative arts field do to succeed and navigate the obstacles that exist as a result of AI in those fields?
Excellent question. So when I speak about my fellow illustrators having been affected, the ones that have been mostly devastated and affected by loss of jobs and opportunity, I mean, like literally overnight, are the ones that were completely dependent on other publishers and other manufacturers to purchase their art or license their work. I, on the other hand, have built my entire life career on creating my own intellectual properties, appealing directly to my customer base. Although I did work for major companies such as Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering and all those things back 30 years ago, I always maintained creating my own brand, my own line that sold directly to the customer. So I could bypass any of that. I didn't have to worry because I was diversified. So the success of an artist or any creative person, music or otherwise, especially in the age of AI right now, where we cannot physically, as human beings, keep up with the speed in which this can create and produce viable, proficient work for companies to use, is going to be to make a human connection. I tell every one of these students that come into me, many of them are in college right now, third year, fourth year, and they're all saying, oh my God, I started 2 years ago before ChatGPT came out. And all of a sudden now the whole world has changed and I'm stuck 3/4 into my college degree. How do I get out of this? And I tell them what is old is new. Yes, I do everything hand painted, but even if I did it digitally, there are so many platforms out there for artists to showcase their work and show how they do it. So live demonstrations, going on Twitch, doing live demonstrations, Patreon, great way to get support. There's so many platforms out there, but the key is to show the human connection, the work. Human beings appreciate that which is difficult to achieve far more than something that is streamlined and easy to accomplish. They put a premium value on it. That's probably most of the reason why I've done so. I've been doing better than I ever have as an artist because of the focus and the attention on what is happening with AI, how it's displacing jobs in the creative fields. So people like yourself and you, Leo, who came up with this, looking at my booth at the Michigan Ren Fair, saw the signs that say everything's 100% hand painted or no AI, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. So we have, as artists and creative people, we need to continue to make people aware of what goes on and how we create these things, because that's what human beings appreciate. We appreciate that struggle and that journey and the process a lot more than just the end result. The end result is only part of the equation. So that's how I advise every one of my fellow artist students. I go, this is how you have to change your business model. You can't rely on companies at this point.
So what you're saying is that it's really important to really sell the human element and like build a community around your human art, right?
Yes, big time. Share your experiences, be as connected as you can, live demonstrations, online, etc. Yes.
All right. Kira, I believe you have our next question. This is going to be a pretty big one, I think.
Are there any uses for AI that you agree with?
Oh, yeah. See, guys, the AI is nothing. The artificial intelligence and the programming that has made that possible is a phenomenal tool. I mean, it can advance in so many ways that are appropriate. I think what I use is and this is the decisions you're going to have to make for your future, guys. You have to decide what you believe is ethical and what is not in regards to applying the use. And in considering those things, you have to figure in a lot of factors. You can't just look for the immediate. You can't just think about, well, how is it going to benefit us right this moment? You have to look at the repercussions down the line. So positive things. I've got a list. It's incredible. I mean, I also, just so you know, I consulted a good friend of mine who's been in the tech field. He's been a programmer, and he also works with AI and implementing AI into major companies. And he gave me a 50-page response about the pros and cons. And I'm just going to touch upon a couple of the positive ones. Medical research is one of the biggest things right now. They do use artificial intelligence to help adults with disabilities. The medical advancements with the brain, the brain computer interface is amazing. Someone that's paralyzed that can now communicate. They have dangerous jobs, guys, that you simply should never have a human being doing. And I think that's the most important thing, is we have to ask ourselves, is this a job that a human being can do versus should or should not do? Because if we start just saying, well, the only place we should be able to use AI in every place there is, no matter what, because it's going to streamline the process, make it easier, et cetera, then inevitably it's going to become its natural instinct to do as much as you can to avoid work. And then inevitably we all become very lazy and don't have any craftsmanship in just about anything we do, because we're using it as a crutch rather than an assisting tool. And that fine line and those degrees have to be adjudicated by you. So there are many very positive things that AI can do that would solve problems that human mind cannot do. So where AI should be applied, in my opinion, is wherever the human cannot succeed in accomplishing that mission, and with the considerations of the long-term effects.
Okay, I have a couple follow-ups. So first, I'd like to ask you a hypothetical. Do you think it's okay, let's say I'm an artist, I'm experiencing some major roadblocks, and I just can't think of something to draw. So I go to ChatGPT and it's like, give me a fantasy idea to draw about. And then that prompts something, and then I draw it. Like, would you agree with that use?
No. And I'll tell you why. As a teacher, and I've been a teacher since 1982, and I've had thousands of students. So I went all across the country. I was doing different seminars at colleges. I had my own private school. And I can tell you from watching when you're thinking about creativity, concept ideas, and things like that, the creative ideas come from your ability to grasp different things that you've learned throughout your lifetime. To be able to go in using what we call executive thought process, the ability to consider all the possible outcomes of a decision made. So you have an idea, someone gives you a basic idea, you have to imagine to visualize the scene. That's the creativity that is most important. And that's what's going to separate you from those that are just technicians. The ability to, let's say a tattoo artist that is given a design, traces it on the body, and just is really good at shading. But if you ever came to them with a basic idea, they wouldn't be able to visualize it. And the reason they're not is because they've never tried it. So what happens, I compare it to the customer that comes in and hands over the drawing and says, here's what I want you to do. that inevitably stunts the growth of the human mind from conceptually coming up with these ideas to begin with. So using ChatGPT or other kinds of resources that generate these compositions for you, it's essentially taking an amalgamation of other people's creative works, because that's what it is. Every data set is a compilation of everyone else's creativity. So as an artist, you never develop that creative compositional skill, that the conceptual part of it. And that is such a crucially important thing if an artist ever wants to to create their own style, their own look and feel. I believe it makes the artist's creativity stunted.
Okay. But yeah, you do agree with AI. It's like if I use an AI to fly a fighter jet because it can experience like way more G-forces than a human could, and it performs maneuvers that we couldn't. That's a good use of it.
Anytime there's technology used where a human cannot or shouldn't do the job, and again, this is on the predicated assumption that it's already been decided it's a good thing to do, right? So in your case, your example is a jet fighter pilot testing that plane to be able to handle its tolerances and all that, and the G-forces. If the intent is we need to have a plane to do that, if we need a jet to do that, then yeah, absolutely. Why risk someone's life just to test a mechanical output? I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, but let's dial it back a bit. What if that same fighter jet can be piloted by a human, but now that guy has lost his job from the AI? Would you agree with that use of it or no?
That's such a great question, Leo. And that's where we get into the gray area and the decision-making process of whether we should or should not, because we have to calculate into every decision whether or not human relevance is going to still be a factor, or are we going to make the human job market obsolete in those sectors? And where does that person now find other employment, other career opportunities? I will give you this example to kind of summarize where you're going with this, and this should answer it. Many times years ago, and even up until recently, we keep hearing the example of, well, look at what happened with the horse and buggy. When the automobile came out, didn't that displace or take away the job of the driver of the horse and buggy? And my answer to that is absolutely not. There was a 1-to-1 ratio. Every one of those horse and buggy drivers learned to drive a car. Then, we actually went for trolley, trains, then cars. And then cars, when it came to job opportunities, you had taxi drivers. And then for 50 years, we had taxi drivers until we had Uber drivers. Then we had Uber drivers. We still have Uber drivers. However, now we're looking at the era in which self-automated driving cars come into play. And so there is the issue. We have to ask the question, should we displace hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of occupations to make an automated driver? Because this is not the same thing as the horse and buggy. It took almost 100 years for us to get there, or more than 100 years. And now, all of a sudden, overnight, every single one of those occupations is lost. So there, yes, it's a question of, should we? Just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should. And that applies to every aspect of science.
And just another follow-up here. You see people relating the, AI coming out as like, they compare what people are saying today to something somebody said 40 years ago about the computer, and then 400 years before that about the letter and how unsophisticated it is and this and that and the other. Do you feel like this is different in any way, or is it the same thing we've been seeing for the entirety of human history?
So again, positive and negatives. So there is technology that have come into play that has absolutely saved lives where otherwise it would not have. It has made that which, especially in the cases where people are disabled, it has completely changed their world. It has given them a quality of life they did not have before. Those I don't think should ever be a question of where we should always, as humans, pursue technology that it helps those individuals and situations. When it comes to technology, just for the sake of advancement, just for the sake of that, in disregarding the overall effect of human beings, the thing is, we're not perfect machines. We are imperfect. And the thing that we value more than anything is being able to overcome those obstacles that we are set before in life. It's how do we run the gauntlet? How do we overcome them? I'll give you my best example is, people say to me, well, we want to get to the end result. We want to get to home plate. We don't care how we get there. We just want to get there fast, because that's what these kinds of efficiency technologies do. Well, I would argue that if all of you had a chance, just think about this for a minute. If all of you had a chance to go to a circus, and at that circus, it's all free, but at the circus, there are 2 tents. And in the tents, there are 2 sets of tightrope walkers, one on one side, one on the other. The tightrope is exactly the same distance. It's 50 feet. They are both dressed the same way. They have a pole in their hand. They're going to walk the tightrope. But one of those tents has a net and the other one doesn't. Which one do you want to go see?
I mean, probably.
Every time I ask that question, the people are all the same. Well, I guess I'd rather, go to the one that doesn't have the net. And I say, why? And they have to think a bit, and they go, well, I guess it's because every single step that tightrope walker takes is critical and could be the end. So there's great risk, right? So, but if you have a technology that removes all risk, where's the challenge? Where's the interest? Where is the motivation to overcome great obstacles? And so that example is where I think there has to be a balance that says, here's where we do need it, where we're never going to achieve this with our human limitations, versus no, we actually can, and we actually should, to keep humans thriving in creativity, driving force. So that's one of the examples I use.
Awesome, great insight. Let's move on to our next question. It's going to be asked by Ethan Austin.
It's Alfred.
Oh, it's Alfred? Oh, sorry, Alfred. I think my paper's wrong.
Give him about 5 minutes warning too.
Okay, wait until the bell. We have about 5 minutes until our break time, by the way.
Okay, then let me wrap this before this next question.
Okay.
Because for those that are going to leave now, I want to leave you with this one thing. I really mean this when I tell you this. You don't think for a second that you don't have all the power when it comes to how AI is used, especially in commerce, especially in the creative arts, music and whatnot. But you have to use that voice of yours by saying, voice and your pocketbooks. Support those artists and those creative people that you enjoy, the musicians, the painters, the sculptors, the voice actors, the games that you play. If you got a game where all of it is done by automation and AI, and this company did actually have real human voices doing the voice acting, and now it doesn't. You simply say, look, until you bring back some voice actors, we're not going to be playing with you. We're not going to pay the fees. We're not going to finance and support you. You have that tremendous power. You also have it on a legislative level, but you do have to be active. You have to be a pain in the neck to those representatives and senators. They need to hear you because they need to be threatened with their jobs. It's the only way things get done, guys. You need to say, I'm not going to tolerate this. You won't be voted back in. But you have to do it in numbers. So you have to organize. But you have that power. I mean, I'm telling you, I don't want everyone, the establishment likes to make it sound like we're the big wigs. We make the decisions. You just follow our lead like sheep. You do not. That's not true. You have all the power financially and you have all the power verbally, but you have to coordinate together and you can't sit back on the sidelines on this, guys. Your entire futures are dependent on you being active and saying where you feel AI is a good thing and where it is not. So I want to leave you that. So you do have power.
That's good to hear. I had to follow up. I kind of forgot it. Do you want to just move on to the next question?
Sure.
Okay. This is by Alfred Anthony Schweihofer III.
You said that people shouldn't use ChatGPT or other AIs for inspiration. Can you elaborate on how that would be different from an artist taking inspiration from Picasso or Van Gogh?
Yes. So what happens when you put in a query, let's say you're doing it in stable diffusion or even Midjourney, because we're talking visual images wise, right? And an artist sits back and says, well, I want to come up with an idea. I've been given this concept by a company. And this company, of course, has interest in making sure they own intellectual property. So the company says to the artist, we have an idea of we want a wizard battle. There are certain elements in our product, our game, that needs to have this, this, and this, and this. If all of a sudden that artist decides to enter all that information in a digital AI generation program, it's going to utilize whatever has been already produced, whatever is already out there. And it's going to assemble it in the variety of different ways that the data set has fed it. So prompting, be it sentences or entire paragraphs, and however many times over and over again, like playing Russian roulette, you would try to enter that in to generate something. Mind you, I'm bypassing the issue of that the artist is not really actually using their own creative brain at this point. They're totally dependent on it. But there is huge risks for generating images that already are too similar to other existing images that exist in copyright that are owned by other companies. This is happening constantly. There are so many companies that I have dealt with who have said, I get images generated for ideas and concepts by these various programs, and they're absolutely too close to what already exists. One of the responsibilities that I have had when I was commissioned to do work in a creative field for a conceptual idea, like say a style guide, was to make sure that I didn't use anything that existed or that had any similarities. It had to be unique. And the AI technology is not there by any means. It's so riddled with the biggest problem, in which I was consulting with my friend who works in the field, is it's consuming itself, guys. The data set out there, everything that has been digitally created and or AI created since ChatGPT came out, constantly needs new material, and it's not getting it. So it can't keep up. So it's only using its own self-generated images. So now imagine you've got defects, you got a sixth finger on a hand, and now that is out there and is being reused in the new data set refreshment. So the refreshing information comes into the data set, it's riddled with all these imperfections, and now the artist goes out and tries to generate images for a concept or creation. Not only does it use things that already exist, but now it has all these defects. It simply doesn't really work. Beyond the fact that it's making the creativity, you're basically becoming lazier and lazier. You're not using your creative concepts and ideas. You're not searching your own mind to pull those things out. And you really do risk the issue of mimicking or plagiarizing or infringing on other things, no matter how good it amalgamates it, So that's what I have seen. And that's, by the way, I like the costume change.
There's more, don't worry.
Very good. Well, anyways, for all of you that are leaving now, thanks for stopping in, guys. It was great. Again, you've got the power. You just got to make your voice heard.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. For those of you who just came back here, this is Ed Beer Jr., world-renowned airbrush artist. He's got this awesome van. I think it's super cool. I'll show you guys after the thing's over, but let's get right back into it. So our next question is from, it's Ryan Morris. Is it actually right here?
Can you tell us more about your litigations with other AI companies?
Okay. Well, to the extent that I can speak, I can tell you what happened with me and how I'm directly involved. There were several artists that gathered. I'm trying to actually that information. I just had that. Yeah. So Midjourney was the big target, but that also included Stable Diffusion. There was obviously ChatGPT, but the Authors Guild was suing OpenAI. Microsoft Getty Images is suing Stability AI. New York Times is suing OpenAI, all for the similar reasons, including Stability AI and DeviantArt. I myself, during the discovery process, which is where in a court the judge requires evidence to be brought forth, basically subpoenas evidence. The big one was Midjourney. When Midjourney provided the data set information, my name was clearly there, as well as all of my imaging, because they used I think it's pronounced Leon data set, which is the big one. It's got 400 million English text imaging. It's an open data set, but it's the one that mainly Midjourney was trained on. So I got that notice that my name was in the top 1,000 for a prompt style. So in other words, if you wanted a wizard and a dragon in the style of Ed Beer Jr., you could get it by simply typing in the style of Edward P. Beer Jr. The only way that works is if they have all of my artwork that I've ever put on the web since 1992, since I've been posting images on the internet. So that was provided to me in evidence documentation. I was contacted at the time by I think it was contacted by one of the class action lawyers. And then once again, I followed up and I communicated with them. And at this point right now, everything's kind of on a hold as we're waiting for further rulings and judicial issues and discussions and debates on, what is going to actually constitute a copyright infringement. We already know that the U.S. copyright law, that as it exists, makes it very clear that you can't use in part or in whole anyone's imaging without authorization, without proper licensing, which means you pay a percentage of royalty or a fee. So there's not going to be any question about that issue. I think the biggest issue is the technique, the technology, and the process that these programs pull from just entering a word prompt or a command that says, I want to see a pretty picture of a barn with flowers in a field. And how is that actually working, and how is it bringing or pulling from all of those images And is that, in fact, when it reamalgamates that and combines bits and pieces of all these different works, is that an actual outright infringement? And to what extent is it? Or in the case of my situation, you're a company that's offering the ability to just put my name in, which brings up thousands of the images that I've ever done, that identifies this is a style using acrylic paint, and it mimics that. So you're mimicking a style. Well, that's plagiarism, right? I mean, if it would be that, it would be plagiarism and authorship. So it would be infringement when it comes to illustration. So we are currently on a holding pattern as we're waiting for the release. This is the last update I've received. We're waiting for the release of the rest of the actual tangible images from that Leon data set. Because evidently someone in authority has decided to put a hold on that because of pornography on it. And so they're having to clean and scrub that. So there goes another issue, guys. Aside from biases and all kinds of other things that occur in the data set that's loaded into these programs, and obviously intellectual property owned by other people, you do have the issue that on the internet, since its beginning, you have inappropriate material that this stuff is also being trained on. So that has been a concern for the courts. So they're stopping us right now. We're basically on a holding pattern until that's scrubbed out, and then it is brought to us so we can actually say, hey, here are all the images that was in that data set by Ed Beer Jr. or by so-and-so artist. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
So it sounds like there's more than just artists involved too, right? So I heard you said there was newspapers in there and like filmmakers, video editors, people like that?
Yeah. It was, so it looks like Stability AI, ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, all notable cases. The Authors Guild was suing OpenAI, and Microsoft. Getty Images who is a licensing company. They have a lot of images that as a company you can go and license and pay a fee to use the imaging. They're going after Stability AI because they basically data scraped all of this stuff. New York Times is suing OpenAI as well, and Microsoft, Stability AI, and DeviantArt. But again, that open data set containing 400 million English image text pairs and all this other stuff, no one even thought to stop. That's the problem with some of this stuff. You know, you recklessly just say, hey, we got a great concept here. This can generate an image, but we need a bunch of data. So we're just going to not even going to concern ourselves that the data that's out there is owned by somebody else because it's someone else's intellectual property, whether it's music. I mean, look at Sora, you know, the video editing or video generating, and it's simulating voices. You know, there's all kinds of things like this. And so those are things that are blatantly unethical. And so we are having to litigate in order to get the courts to decide, yes, this is a form of infringement, regardless if it's reamalgamated and, you know, spit out like a decoupage, which is basically when you cut a bunch of pictures out and they stick it onto something. I'll take the legs from there, the arm from there, the head from there. And it's already been established in copyright law that is illegal. So I think, unfortunately, it just has to go through this long litigational process to become established. It's no different than Napster. Napster had the same situation, you know, and inevitably what happened with that case? Well, they wind up paying royalties to every single musician who's ever had their their music used on that platform. YouTube's got a scenario like that, you know, with the Harry Fox agency, where they're paying people for all of the downloaded music and then reposted on different YouTube channels. Whenever there's a violation or a claim, the money coming from all that ad revenue goes to some of those artists. So that's how they resolve the injury. But it's a question of moving forward, which goes to the next issue, which is right now companies knowing that, such as like say Adobe, you know, Adobe Suites. They tried about a month or so ago to impose in their terms of service that anything you do while using their program that includes up on the cloud is accessible to them, and that you give them permission to use it in the training of their data set. So of course, imagine you're a company that's working under an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Everything you're doing is confidential. You don't want your imaging or your concepts to be available to anyone else to go and use who's also doing design work of the same thing. This is what Adobe tried to do. Well, what happened? The public responded. The artists, the graphic artists, the designers, the company said, hey, no. We won't use your products anymore if you pull this. And they quickly backstepped and they pulled that condition out. But that's what they're doing. They're trying to get fresh new data. A lot of times you'll see companies now hiring artists just to generate images that are fresh so they can say, well, all of this stuff is properly licensed. So my data set only includes things that are legal. And while that may that may come to the table as far as, yes, now it's done legal. We have a data set that's 100% legally licensed, legally used. Then it gets down to, all right, now we have to ask ourselves, should we allow that to happen when these image generating systems can produce a product in seconds in comparison to what the human hand can do, and watch it displace every musician, visual artist, actor, voice actor. And that's where the debate comes to the ethical issue, not so much the legal issue, but the ethical issue.
So like, how do you feel about being like, let's say a company paid you a pretty fair commission to create art for their AI and they credited you and all that stuff. Would you be okay with that? Is that a good use, or would you still prefer the human element of, actual art?
Recently Nicolas Cage made a statement regarding this, especially how it applies to the movie industry and actors. As soon as you do something like that, you go down a rabbit hole, you're never going to come. It's a dead end. If I take, let's say I was paid a pretty penny to illustrate a variety of all kinds of different things in my style, or allow any company to use all my art legally and get out there, I've just sabotaged my own career or my future, because I am not going to be able to compete with myself. I can't compete with my own imaging, my own look and feel, and something that can be prompted in a few moments compared to the hundreds of hours I spend to create a product. So business-wise, it would be an absolute sabotage to my whole career, and it would be to anybody's artist career. And that's what I keep trying to tell many of these artists. If you're going to go for the short term and you're only looking to make the quick hit and run, that's the route you go, because you have sabotaged your own career if you generate images for this type of use. And then there is of course, no, I would never do it for the simple fact that I'm looking at a much bigger picture here. I'm looking at the future of relevance with humanity and creative arts, whether it's music, art, movies, voice acting. My son is a voice actor, right? So for at least the first 10 years of his adult life in his career, he was getting a lot of gigs. This was before Sora and these different programs came out. And he was working for the game industry, the online gaming. He was actually contracted to do commercials for DE, digital entertainment, Warframe. We're talking some big name games. And it was very clear to everyone in the industry overnight, so much of it was being transferred over to the AI generated imaging and platforms. So we saw a direct hit. My daughter is a musician. She's had multiple albums. She's worked with different people. She does soundtrack music. And again, just like you can see the spigot turned off, because so many companies that she was working for, which included everything from podcasters and their programs all the way up to pretty major commercial uses. She worked with Midnight Syndicate, who did a lot of the haunted soundtracks and whatnot. And while they're still working in that field, they and all of the musicians in that field are seeing their market share go to nothing. And that's because it comes down to money, guys. It's, if a company, smaller especially, is looking to save every penny they can, and they can, for $8 a month, use another platform to generate whatever they want, how are you going to beat that financially? So yeah, it comes back to decisions on, do we want to preserve the relevance of human creativity, or do we just want to look at technology efficiency, saving money?
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, we got a follow-up here. So you were talking about the power of the pocket to affect change. How do we know which ones to go, like which companies to go after?
Well, first and foremost, they have to disclose that they're using AI in their programming or whatever products they're producing. They should. I mean, there will be some companies that will try to hide it, but eventually that'll come out. Mm-hmm. You certainly, here's one of the things the only thing right now that I can tell you that is benefiting the creatives right now is that the U.S. Copyright Office continues to reinforce that you cannot copyright anything that is generated through a prompt through AI. Now, they have recently, talk about recent, Friday, they announced that, well, we're going to allow the courts to decide the degree of input if you generate an image or something through AI, but then take it into another program and then humanly edit it. To what extent is the human contribution been done to justify an ownership or copyright? That's a high bar to match.
Yeah.
I'm in court cases all the time, and that comes down to with the exception of fair use, which will be parody, satire, for education purposes and other, that's going to be very challenging. Most of the courts and the judicial system do not like to grant copyright to individuals that use other people's imaging as a basis. It has to be so modified that it is no longer clearly recognizable by a layman. So I think that's helping us for companies that, they realize that anything they do generate with AI or they contract out to be done that way isn't going to be able to be protected. So now it's just a race to the market because they know they can't control their IP. So, but other than that, yeah, we really have to watch it and watch what's happening, keep the social media communications going and challenge these companies. Say, did you use AI and to what extent?
Okay, back to the court. So you're talking about this trial is probably going to mark a big shift in how AI companies use images to create their art. Do you have an estimate on how long it's going to be until we see that change, or do you think it's just indefinite until somebody figures it out?
Yeah, well, boy, there are cases that get settled in like 3 months because they usually settle. They don't actually go to a ruling. This case is getting the long haul dragged out because you got big players, guys. You have Microsoft and Google financing because they have billions and if not almost trillions of dollars at stake here if they can't get away with continuing to use other people's intellectual properties. But already you immediately upon the filing of this lawsuit, you started to see companies, including Adobe, move in the direction of we need to get fresh new data set material to feed. And so they started right away saying, hey, look, if you use our platform, we're going to use this information. If you post it here, we're going to use this information. That's how they're already taking action to try to avoid, because they know what they've done already by using the existing data sets, billions of information. They know that they're going to sink on that. That's going to wind up being a Napster. It's just such a long process. And in the meantime, all these people, by the way, it's not the end user, the consumer that's responsible here at all. They had no idea. If you go to Midjourney or anybody else it's in fact, they do not say you can file for copyright on these images, but they do say you can, it's your image, whatever you generate from your prompts, and you can use it any way you want commercially as well. Well, so you have a company that's saying to the end user, the everyday kid, that it's okay to use this in a commercial application. They start a small business, they start using it. They have a nice, cool logo that they've created through the AI. And now all of a sudden, 3 years later, they've built a brand and someone else has generated a similar image because of a prompt seed. Somehow it was the similar thing. They could do it again. And now you have a competing logo that looks very similar to almost an exact look and feel. You try to protect yourself. You go to court, you file a court, and the court's going to tell you, I'm sorry, you generated that through this program. You have no rights to sue it. Now you can't protect your icon. So the public doesn't know this. They don't think about this. They're not being told this. And truthfully, they're being misled. So I think you have to allow the public to know. That's why it's so important you guys all talk about this and go, and it's not just on the visual side, not just on the music or any of the arts. It has to apply to everything, because when people work really hard at creating something like an invention, a concept, a pattern, a patent, a trademark, they deserve protections. So yeah, that's already happening.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you really don't blame anyone but the AI companies, right? It's not the artist, it's not the end user, it's not the middleman, but it's AI itself, huh?
It's the way in which these programs were trained, and the fact that the companies that use these data sets, which is everything that was ever published on the internet, they did it without any regard to copyright, intellectual property ownership, or otherwise. Yeah, no, it's got nothing to do with the end user. Now, if you tell the end user, an average everyday Joe that's using, these prompts for commercial purposes, non-commercial purposes. Look, guys, everybody's using AI to generate a meme, right?
Right.
So the issue there is pretty much there isn't any commercial application. So you start to say to yourself, well, where is the financial damage? Where is the loss? Perhaps it's not that great in that situation. The greater loss is the enormous amount of resources is being used every time millions and millions of memes are being generated. That's getting into water pollution and so forth. So you have to consider that. Is that a good use of all of these resources to just do fun memes? Because it's cool, but it's taxing the crap out of the power grid. So then we get into the commercial applications of things. Now you have the end user going, yeah, but I don't want to pay a designer. I don't want to pay a voice actor. I don't want to pay a musician to do my jingle. I want to get away with it cheap. And therefore I want to use something that now that I even know that it's all of the data set is being used without license, or most of it is being used without licensing. Now you have an ethical issue. And until the court says no, the public is going to do whatever they can. Their attitude is, hey man, cheat to win. I see it there. It's available. It's very similar to everybody that ever downloaded anything. If we download music and we don't pay a fee to the artist and licensing, are we really fans of those artists and those musicians? And then, but we did it. All of us did it. We didn't know any better. And then all of a sudden we find out. Well, then what happens? If you're still downloading that music and you're still not paying anything in, or if you're streaming for free constantly, and you're aware that these musicians are getting, 1/1,000,000th of a penny per download, that's never going to amount to anything for their careers. Can you really say you're supporting the creative arts, your fellow man? So those are the ethical and moral questions that everybody's got to ask themselves. And until rulings come in, which say, no, now it's a naughty thing. Now it's illegal. Now, if you do it, you're going to get penalized. You'd hope that your generation especially, who is so in tune to this right now. And the reason you're in tune to it is because it's absolutely going to affect your occupations, your future, your ability to survive, your ability to feel any kind of achievement or accomplishment is going to be subject to how is all of us, no matter what age we're in, going to compete with something that can outdo us 1,000,000 times to one. So there comes down, you have to keep thinking every time you use a unethical use of AI, you are negatively affecting yourself, your fellow man, your children, your grandchildren, and so forth. So,
Okay. Carlos Zuniga has another question for us here. These are actually right behind me.
Has AI influenced the way that you create art?
yeah, in a way, I'll tell you how that is happening. Like I said, guys. Oh, costume switch again. Great job. My God, I think you have my whole wardrobe. Holy moly. So yeah, it has influenced. I say this, guy, what's old is new. I will tell you in my career. So of course, I started in a time period back in the 70s, where there was no other option except hand painted. My God, I was doing signs, lettering on the side of trucks because the DOT requires identification and licensing numbers for any truck that's on the road. Well, back before vinyl came out, before 3M had a plotter, every single sign that you saw on the highway or anyway had to be hand done. So I was a sign painter. I had a tremendous career doing that. And I saw overnight how when 3M came out with the plotter, that job was gone. Now, fortunately, again, I was diversified. I didn't plant my eggs in all one basket. So I was doing all these other portraiture, animals portraiture, in-memory portraits. I was doing oil painting. I was doing murals. I'd go to a restaurant and I'd knock on the door and say, hey, you got this big outdoor wall. You're an Italian bistro. Let me do you a scene of Italy, So I was making money in many different ways. But as the technologies came out, and back in 93, 94, I remember when Photoshop started coming out. By the time I got to Photoshop 7, I saw how proficient the program was. Many of my students, out of 100 students that I had, prior to the digital art programs such as Photoshop, before that, maybe 10 out of 100 were capable of hand-eye coordination. All of them were creative. All of them had great concepts and ideas. They understood anatomy, shadowing, light and shade, and all this other good stuff, composition, structural balance. But when it came to being able to hold the paintbrush, to manipulate tangible mediums of paint against gravity and put it in the exact right spot, because a lot of this stuff is a permanent medium, you don't have endless editing ability. You have to get it right. It means you have to think ahead of time. Every move you make has got to be precise. Only about 10% of the people kids who were in my class were capable of that. So the other 90 of them that weren't able to do the hand-eye coordination wound up going into art directing, art consulting, conceptual ideas, and research and development. Then Photoshop became more and more advanced. And by the time year 2000 and CS1 came out, I would say at least 60 to 70% of my students were capable of producing proficient work using the programs. Because why? The big separating factor between doing tangible old school medium and the digital is endless editing. If I didn't get it right, undo it. You can't do that when you hand paint. So the process became streamlined. It was more available, and everybody just went crazy with that. So back to your question about, how does it change? Well, here we are, all through the digital age in the last 25 years. I was constantly being told, Ed, you're going to be a dinosaur. You're going to be out like the horse and buggy, you're going to be obsolete. And I floated through the last 25 years still being a commodity. Everybody that came, all these kids that would come into my booth who had been only aware of digital art creations, you go to conceptart.org or whatever you did over the last 25 years, you saw always digital imaging. You very rarely saw hand painted. But then they come into my galleries or my shows and they watch me paint. They're going, holy moly, you do this like old school, like Bob Ross guy, And I would say to them, I go, yeah, why not? I said, because I produce an original one of a kind hand painting at the end of the day. I'm still producing a cool image that a company can use. But I also have this hand-painted original painting that I'm going to sell for big money. And they would all be like, oh, wow. I said, yeah, see, if you're only using digital, while you do generate the same end result and you satisfy the company, you don't have any income because you have no original painting to sell. You've been pushing pixels for the same amount of time in some cases as I do when I spend on my painting. So I would push that. I never found it a financial deficit. But all of a sudden now, with the age of AI merging, and the problem with so many of these digital artists that they can't keep up. They're not going to be able to be competitive against their own stuff, let alone digitally created imaging, no matter how streamlined their process is. And they're seeing their jobs being eradicated. And I keep saying, and yet I'm making more money than I ever have. Why? Because your generation is coming to see me, seeing me hand draw this stuff. I'm an entertainer. I'm not just producing an end result. The process and the journey of doing my work is attractive. It's exciting. It's thrilling. I'm the guy that walks the tightrope without a net because I don't have editing ability to the ends of the earth. I have to know exactly where I'm putting my stuff, which means I've had to master my skill set. That takes years, decades. So I think that's the problem is the cheat to win methods or the shortcuts in everything we do in life. They wind up kick us in the butt later on because eventually technology catches up to us and makes us obsolete. Unless you're doing something that technology can never do. And in my case, it's hand painting. I mean, I'm producing original art, man. And you've got robots that can paint. They've shown you robots that can paint, but it's not the same thing. Human beings admire other people going through their challenges, overcoming those great obstacles, being able to wield difficult materials and so forth. So yeah, I've actually done better thanks to the awareness of the rapid out of control AI, evolution.
Okay, that's actually some really interesting things that I didn't even consider, the whole digital not having a physical copy of it. But I think we got to keep moving. So Alex Barr has another question for us. I don't know where he's sitting, right behind me. There.
Are you familiar with Nightshade or other measures that might be able to help protect artists' IPs? Are they worth using?
Great question. Yes, actually, I do have some information on that. I'm going to pull that up. Again, I'm fortunate to have collectors who work in the field, and they gave me some real good background on the Nightshade and the Glaze and so many other programs or things that you can do to your images. Let me see here. All right, so there's a couple of things. There is laws that are in place that prevent you from sabotaging your own work or house, let's say. And this is even beyond terms of service. I can't lace a window in my house with razor blades and say when a burglar comes in through my window and gets cut up, that I can't sit back. I wish I could, but I can't sit back and say that was his problem. He had no right to illegally be breaking in. He got cut up. Well, it's a similar concept because you could be held liable for this malicious intent and whatever. There are companies that have policies. If you use their platforms, it very clearly states that you are not to use anything that will poison or otherwise corrupt the programming and software because it's a form of sabotage. It's a cyber attack sabotage type thing. So you have to be aware of that. If you're going to take your images into Glaze and you're going to take it into Nightshade, which is going to basically make the image incorrectly read for the bots and the spiders, right? So what happens? I have a wizard and I call it a toilet, but I put hashtags toilet, So now when that bot comes out and it spiders that image, it starts to put it in its data set and relates it to a toilet. So the next time someone uses an image generating system and puts in the word wizard, they're going to get a toilet. So that's a very simple example, but it's what I was explained. That can be considered a violation of terms of service, and now you can be held liable with that. Now, on the other hand, what if you use Nightshade and Glaze on your own website or your own platform? You're not asking these spiders to come in. It's not your responsibility that those companies have gone out and searched for images, came to your house, and you stepped and it landed on an image that you've decided it was a toilet and you hashtagged a toilet or whatever, embedded into it. That's where it's the gray area. And so I think until we find a litigation case on this come out where we have a ruling, let's talk on the practical sense. Why do we even put our art? If you're a musician or a voice actor or an artist, why would you even put your stuff up on the web if not to get noticed, right? And not to see. You're doing that because you want the public to see your work. If you already have a group of followers, then you can do that in many different ways. You can have a Patreon, you can have a Discord of your own, whatever. But the whole point of putting it on the open internet is to be able to get people who do a search in Google or wherever for a specific, I want to see a wizard and dragon. You want your work to show up on the top first page. So the problem with the Nightshading and Glaze is you've eliminated that possibility. Even if it's not illegal, even if you could do it, and even if it will never be considered a form of cyber sabotage or otherwise, you're not going to be seen. So it's a means to an end anyways. So you can, sure, if your only objective is to prevent any of your images on any platform, even your own, to ever be used without permission, Nightshade it till the ends of the earth and Glaze it, but you have that risk of possible litigation. And more importantly, they're going to I don't think at this point, with everything that's ever been scraped already, we're going to be able to control that anyways. I don't think effectively. And I think if we do, it's going to be cutting our nose off to spite our face. Watermarking the heck out of your images does help to some extent. I do it, but they can figure out a way around that too. So there's challenges, but yeah, that's my thoughts on Nightshade. I don't use it myself. I just watermark the heck out of it.
Okay, so that wraps up our preset questions. Next, we're going to have open-ended questions that I will walk around and give them the mic to. So does anyone have any? I thought we had a couple.
Challenge me, guys. Come on. There's got to be some of you guys that think AI is great. I want you to challenge me. And because this is the most important thing, because what's going to happen here is, guys, neither you or I know the full outcome of what's happening right here. I'm trying not to speak from bias. I'm not an anti-tech guy. In fact, I absolutely see and would hope to be able to use some of these technologies in the future. I know there are certain technologies you can't do it any other way. I'm not an anti-digital artist either. I never have been. CGI, for instance. I mean, my God, that's animation. No one's doing hand-drawn, hand-painted cells anymore, right? So you have to use the tool that's relevant and it's appropriate for the art form that's being inevitably done as an end result. So I'm not anti that. What I am is I'm pro-humanist. I have to look at, I've got children. We have friends that have young people just now, like yourselves, coming out of high school, and they're so depressed over things like this. They're looking at where's my future? If I could spend $100,000 for an academic degree, and within the 3 to 4 years, that field is also going to be hit, because it literally is applying to an enormous amount of fields. And I that's why I said, how do we empower you today? Well, because you can decide by the power of whether you financially support it or through organizing. You could call it protest if you want, but it's an organization of multiple like-minded people who say, hey, I need to get out there and I need to talk about this. This is not a good thing. This is using it in this field is inappropriate. It's not necessary. This is just, all this does is eliminate the human connection. And that's all it does. The benefits do not outweigh the negatives. But then there are so many other places that the AI, artificial intelligence technology, is the only option we have to fix these problems, So anybody out there, guys, come on, you got to have some question that.
But we do have one, actually. So introduce yourself and then go ahead.
My name's Ethan, and I just wanted to ask you about like the human element. Do you think that we'll get to a point where we like real art, like especially like physical art, with AI becoming so popular, will we get to a point where it's kind of like a niche or a like it's just a it's more of a gimmick. It's just like, oh, all of these images are being produced online. Like they've had a large enough like data set to make something like professional. Will we reach a point where it's like the only way that like artists can be successful is if they're appealing to a like a traditional art crowd?
Yes. All right. So that's happening right now. In my case, I've always appealed to the niche of the persons that look to see how things are done the hard way. So there's two components I've always believed in any creative process and end result. So you have the final, in the case of visual images, you have the final visual image. And that's the one that the general public who doesn't know me from Adam, doesn't know me, is going to see. And they're going to go, oh, that's kind of cool. And a lot of times they'll say, man, that's so vintage 90s look. Well, it's going to be because it's acrylic painting, right? So I'm not using a digital palette with presets or anything that's going to have that look and feel. So that's their first impression. They don't know anything about me beyond that. So if all they ever do is see the final end result of an image that's online from mine and don't research who did it or anything further, it's pretty much a dead end at that point. They won't know whether it's AI generated or not. It's our job as creative people to make sure that we get our name and how we do things behind every image that we put out there. So I have always done that. I have always marketed myself as not just what I do, but how I do it. So I've always been, I like to call myself the Bob Ross of my industry, the happy little dragons. I've always done live demonstrations. Every show I go to, I paint while I'm there. And I got kids coming up to me when I'm drawing, especially, and they'll go, oh, that's really cool. And I hide objects in my pieces. I like to make them interactive. It's kind of like I Spy for big kids. So I have these kids come up to me and they go, oh, I see an owl in the tree. And I go, yeah. I said, and it's not just sitting there, it's hidden. And then they'll look and I'll go, do you see the sword? Do you see the goblet? And then they'll ask me, can you hide this, and that? I'll say, what do you want me to hide? And so I'll say, well, go ahead, go have some fun at the fair. Come back about an hour later and we'll see what I've done. So I'm always interacting. I'm not this as an illustrator or a creative person. I am not about the end result. Musicians, live performances is the crucial key to the success of their career right now, because there's not enough money coming and never will be from streaming. Because the pennies, less than pennies, the millionths of a penny that they pay, it never amounts to anything. You can have hundreds of millions of downloads and you'd be lucky if you made $6,000 for the year. So musicians know that live performance, human connection, seeing them perform live is what they're amazed with. And that's what they will pay. They will tip, they will support, they will buy the merchandise. In the case of voice singing live, once you find out someone's auto-tuned, that's all of a sudden like, yeah, okay. So they're going to hit that note no matter what, because the auto-tune algorithm is going to make sure it happens. So there is as long as we keep the understanding to the general person out there, especially the new generations, that they should question how things are done. And that way they can get a sense of the achievement, the accomplishment, which gives them that basis for admiration. We are always wanting to admire something that is difficult to achieve. So my thoughts on that is, think of it as, I was a U.S. powerlifter when I was younger, right? And I actually set world records in deadlift. I was a little guy, 148 pounds, but I pulled a 605 pound deadlift, 555 squat. I was a powerhouse guy, but it was all natural. I refused to take any drugs, even though that was very prevalent in the late 70s, early 80s. And I went and competed nationally on the all naturals. And then we'd have every now and then a guy come in and he juiced up to the max. And they'd, maybe they'd equal me or occasionally come even close, maybe even beat me on different meets. We do it back and forth. And I said, look, take the drugs away and let's see what you really can do. This cheat to win method, I got to do whatever it takes to get to the end. That is not, when you really look at that on an ethical and a moral level, it is not as impressive. It just never will be. There will always be that tainted aspect of you took these streamlined processes and these cheat methods to get to your end result, as opposed to the person that did it completely on their own, naturally, the hard way. So I think that it's not going to be a niche as long as all of you folks consider the human connection to it and really give the credit where the credit's deserved. Don't let it be just what you see, the last end result. Question the process, because we already have technology that can do what humans do and outdo it. So what's our point? If it's not, for creative expression to be valid, it has to have had suffering and struggle and accomplishment and achievement and mastery of a craft. If it's just about the end result, we've already lost the battle, because we can't compete with what technology can do.
All right. We have another one back here. Better be a good one.
So our teacher mentioned something about the legal copyright laws for like engineering development. I was wondering if you could expand upon that and other fields that are affected unexpectedly, like chemistry.
Okay. So you have, hang on, I'm going to get to that. That was the one I consulted with the gentleman that I know that is a programmer that actually implements AI. His concerns, and he says, as it stands right now, there's a lot of bias within the data set. So, bad information coming in, bad information going out. And if you're a company, and if I don't answer this question correctly, please rephrase it. But I'm thinking what we might be going down is, yeah, here it is. There are clear examples of AI being manipulated or failing in ways that really raise concerns, which is the bias AI models. The fact that AI is consuming itself, AI generated content becomes more prevalent as AI models risk training on AI created data, leading to degradation, I guess. The ethical legal copyright issues. There's a big issue right now with lawyers. So Office 365, Copilot that's implemented and embedded into those systems is now basically unavoidable. You can't get rid of it. And it takes everything and anything that those attorneys are doing with those folders, those file folders that are allocated to confidential information for clients. And it's taking from that, reusing all that data and information, resourcing it, creating the data set so that another attorney somewhere else who inputs something that may be a correct prompt that brings up that information that's been scraped off of some other case and is bringing it into their platform. And so now there's a big risk, and this is a big concern right now that a lot of attorneys are talking about, is, how do we use Office 365 when Copilot's going to be sucking that data set? Because companies and clients do not want any of their material to be exposed to a data set scraping, ever, because of confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements. It's the same thing I was saying earlier about companies that I work. Every single one of the companies that I work with that I've illustrated for games especially have put me under NDA. I can't really reveal that information. I can't release it. And the last thing they want is bits and pieces and parts of my imagery, their unique, not so much trademark, but certainly iconic look and feel, to be sucked into a data set that any other artist can use who's also working for a competitor. And when it comes to attorneys, there's the legal issues of confidentiality that could be at risk. So I don't know much about the chemistry industry. I don't know about, there's so much of the science, but I think it all comes down to the concerns over proprietary protections. And other than that, the fact that, well, guys, look, here's a great example. These two envelopes, these are credit card application solicitations that I received over the last 6 months. I've received dozens of them, by the way. So they're all from Capital One. And they say, to Art of Ed Beard, attention, Lich Undead. Now, do you know what Lich Undead is? It's one of the paintings that I have done on my website out of the hundreds of them that are posted. An undead lich is a character in D&D. So this, I have received from every credit card company the solicitation to the business of Art of Ed Beard Jr. to attention, Lich Undead. So I called these companies up and said, hey guys, where are you getting your mailing list from? And they told me, well, it's an AI generated list. I said, how does that come out? Well, they go out and they spider different businesses and websites and they pick up information. And they use, then we combine that with other databases that we've gotten from other credit card companies. I said, and what else? Well, the credit reporting, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. I said, so you're telling me that right now those databases have lich undead associated with my business as a person? I said, you know that they're getting a better credit card rating offer than I do? This is pretty insane. This is not even a real thing. So you have the issue of the AI is not working correctly. It's failed. I mean, when you're getting this, and I can't get rid of it, by the way. I can't remove it. I've continued to get the same company I've told multiple times to remove it. They said there's no way we can. It's third-party outsourcing that's using AI. So there are serious corruption issues that are occurring with it. It is bad information in, bad information out, but they're allowing a little too much automation. Because when an undead lich can get a credit card with a better offer than I have, I'm a little concerned, How is he using his credit card? He's undead. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand. So I don't know if I answered your question exactly what you were looking for. If you want to rephrase it, go ahead.
No, that really helped me. But the biggest concern for me is, so in engineering per se, AI is getting better at, like just recently I saw something where two companies were competing on trying to replicate the physics of like a ball. Like as AI is getting better, because whole teams are working on these AIs to make them better. So eventually they're going to start figuring out like what data sets are being fed in incorrectly. Like, is AI going to improve due to these teams so much that like teams of engineers are not going to be able to work together for a product, and it's going to be sacrificed? Like the job market is going to be sacrificed that way?
Oh yeah, that's one of the things that my good friend pointed out. He said it was his 5 to 10 year outlook regarding that is that there will be new jobs, and those jobs are what you just described. The jobs of what he's doing. He goes in and he cleans up the mess from the data set, and he cleans up the way in which the AI works with the companies he's dealing with. So there's where your new jobs are going to be. But that's a job. It's a means to an end, because once he's done that job effectively, once he's cleaned that up, there won't be any purpose for him. And so one of the things he mentioned is he said the whole objective now is we as technology people who understand what's wrong and how things are getting corrupted, we're going to clean it up to a certain extent, but we're going to keep a little bit left so we keep our relevance in our jobs. So, there's these willful things that are occurring. And as far as working together with, so we have all of these tech people trying to clean the mistakes up that are happening and trying to hone it so it's better and better and better until it's perfect. Well, once it makes that perfection, as close to perfection as you get, where is their jobs? What's their purpose and what's their need? Because as he had mentioned, there were two people I actually consulted. One of them who said the 5 to 10 year outlook is what we have right now. We have, I think Forbes magazine put out about, and Business Insider also did. These are pretty respectable locations to go to for info. And they tabulate different polls and different resource surveys. And they were looking at about a 25%. 1 in 4 jobs in the white collar industry of tech industry, service industry, business have been eliminated. And I didn't want to have to go down the rabbit hole of how many different jobs have actually been eliminated, but the list was huge. It was over 150 total industry. I'm going to give you only just a few. Telemarketing, receptionists, customer service representatives, retail cashiers. Obviously, we all know that. We go into how many stores now that we see self-checkout. So that's a job loss for a cashier. Bookkeeping, billing, assembly line workers because of robotics, which has always been an issue anyways. Proofreaders, bank tellers, warehouse workers. So Prometheus is one of the systems that's implemented in a lot of warehouses, and Amazon was testing that out. I think it was tested in an Ohio location. I don't think it worked perfectly, so they're still working it out. But once it does, there goes your jobs. So that's just a few of them. I mean, the list is everywhere. Loan officers, insurance underwriters, real estate. Artificial intelligence can do so many jobs. So again, it gets back down to the question of, so should we say no? Should we say we don't really care about all of these careers and all of these individuals? The idea of retraining, how are you going to retrain all of these, millions of people to what? And do we really need artificial intelligence to handle a mortgage broker, or a, at what point do we say this career is worth throwing away versus one that's not? Those are the questions that you guys will have to answer in the future.
Well, I think we're out of time. We're down to our last minute. I'd really like to thank you for coming out. This was a amazing interview. I think it helps
Well,
pretty
thank
much
you, Leo.
everyone in this room. I'm very grateful for you coming out.
Well, the hope is that the one thing I kept emphasizing to you guys is you have the power to change and make these decisions. You are not that young man that just spoke. He has the power. He gets together with all of his other students that are in that field of expertise and say, look, guys, we need to start talking about this and making this be aware. And we have to start pushing some resistance on it. You have the power to do that by not just not financially supporting the companies that use it, but also in just the social aspects of things. And then finally, you have the ability to contact your representatives and harass the heck out of them and say, look, we're not letting up on this subject, because we're not just going to sit around, do nothing, and have automation do everything for us. We have to keep preserving human relevance where it can be done, where it's not necessary to be outsourced and replaced by artificial intelligence. So I think that's all in your hands, but you absolutely have the power. I know I'm dictated by it. Whatever you guys say you want to see me paint is what I do. I don't sit back and just paint what I like. I have to listen to you, because otherwise you're not going to buy my stuff. There you go.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
And thanks again.